Hi, this is Stephan from SSW, and today we are going to talk about credit notes, TimePro, and Zero. Let's jump into it. So we recently had an example of a client calling one of our account managers, Ulysses McLaren, and asking him to provide credit for one of the invoices. After much fighting, Yuli agreed, and we approved $742.50 credit note on the account. Now, the issue that we have here really is that A, there is no sync from TimePro to Zero for the credit note, so this document does not exist in Zero at all. And then B, there is no process or way of handling that credit note in TimePro itself. Obviously, doesn't exist in Zero, so nothing happens on the Zero side as well. So what we need to accomplish is to build up a process in TimePro that will take care of the credit note. There are two sets of users that will be using credit notes. It will be the account managers, and they will use the credit notes directly in TimePro, depending on scenarios. And B, we will have accountants processing and handling the credit note in Zero, again, depending on scenarios. So let me explain what the two scenarios that we want to tackle are. So first one is, right, so the credit note was approved. Yuli has created the entry in TimePro, and now the client wants for Yuli to apply that credit note to a particular invoice. Let's go into a credit note first and explain what needs to happen on the credit note. So on the credit note side, we need to have a link, an option, a provision that will enable Yuli to grab this credit note and to apply it to a particular invoice. So I'm presuming that here somewhere on the top page it needs to say, "Hey user, you have $742 of credit, and do you want to apply it to an invoice?" When we click apply to an invoice, you need to be able to apply it only to the client, which in this case is Rapid System. So you need to be able to apply the credit note just to that particular client. So once that is done, once the allocation of the credit note has happened, the total amount of the credit note does not change. It's still $742.50. The less applied amount will be $742.50, and the total due amount will now be nil because we have allocated that credit note to an invoice. So there is nothing further to action on the credit note itself, right? It's now nil, and that's all fine. Another thing that needs to happen as well is that in the receipts section, it needs to show the date stamp. So it needs to, if the credit note has been allocated today, it needs to show today's date, and preferably what we want to show as well in the notes section is that we have applied it against an invoice and stating what the invoice ID is. Obviously, still we need to still show the client and all of those other fields that we have in the receipt section. So that's what happens on the credit note. So a very similar thing will happen on the invoice itself. So on the invoice itself, we need to have a ping somewhere, preferably here, with the finance details of the invoice saying, hey user, you have $742.50 of credit on this client. So do you want to apply that credit to this invoice? So once the account managers hit and click yes, the total amount of the invoice again does not change, but we now have a less applied amount of $742.50, and then the total due will be the difference between total and less applied, meaning it's the total due will be reduced by $742.50. So that's the part on the invoice. Another very important part as well here in receipts, we need to show the date stamp, and we need to show that it was paid from a credit note and state the credit note ID. So that's that from TimePro. Then what needs to happen with Zero is so we have marked the credit note as fully paid. we have partially paid this particular invoice for $742.50. Now we have to sync that back to our beloved Xero, so that those documents are A, listed in Xero, and that they, and B, that those amounts have been offset against each other. So credit note is nil, the remaining amount, and then the invoice is reduced, the due on the invoice is reduced for $742.50. The other scenario is, let's say that Rapiscan decided to, okay, cool, so we do not want you to allocate that credit to a particular invoice. We would prefer a cash refund to our bank account. So that process can only be done by accountants because the account managers do not have access to the bank. So at that point, the account managers would email accountants and say, hey, we have this and this client, and can you please, they have this and this credit note, can you please arrange for a cash refund to that bank account? So now that everything is synced and working in Xero, so we have the document, we have the sales credit notes. FYI, this is a manually created credit note, so don't be confused. So currently, TimePro is not syncing those credit notes back to Xero. So this is a manual entry. So what we would then do from our accounting perspective is we would open that credit note. We would arrange for a cash refund. So it'll be two steps. We first have to mark this credit note as paid. So I'll select the current date, and then I need to select an account that this goes through. Typically, it would go for through the SSW check account, but for this example, I will need to use Citibank card for some various bits and reasons which probably are not in the scope of this video. So I'll just add a refund here. And what it will do in Xero is it will mark the credit note as paid. So the remaining credit is $0. If I go back to Rapiscan, the credit note is not being listed in the awaiting payment section anymore. So that's the first part. And then the second part is that I need to go into the credit card account, into reconcile items. So I need to reconcile that particular payment with a cash outgoing, right? Because we are paying the cash back to the client. So let me just type in Rapiscan and I'll show all the items that we have. So let's say that we have paid it out via bank statement. So the bank statement came in, so we paid it out via bank. The bank statement came in. It's saying $742.50 in spent. And then I hit here Rapiscan system and then I reconcile. This is the reconciliation or the receiving part in Xero. My assumption, at least at this point, I'm not sure if this is too relevant and too correct, but my assumption that at this point we need that receipt between the bank statement and the actual transaction feeding back through into TimePro and marking the credit notes here as being paid out. So no outstanding amount. And that's really it. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you have any queries, issues, or questions. I'm happy to assist on this one. Thank you. See ya.